Thank you. A local Ignatian nun who spent a majority of her life teaching at a seminary school learned yesterday her former student is now the leader of the Catholic Church. Sister Brigant taught at Catholic Theological Union for some 45 years, teaching the introduction of the Old Testament to her students. And says Bob, as she liked to call him back then, was a very smart young man and a hardworking student.
He was a good student. He was a reliable student, which is always what a teacher likes, you know, whether you're teaching second grade or you're teaching graduate school. He was a very reliable student and very serious about his studies.
Sister Brigant taught Pope Leo during his first year in the seminary school. Teacher at Mishicot's Otto H. Schultz Elementary School surprised to hear that she's won the 2026 Teacher of the Year award. It's an achievement awarded to just a handful of educators in the entire state. Jamal James speaks with faculty at the elementary school about this amazing accomplishment. He's live now in the studio with the details on that. Jamal.
Bill, the waterworks were going and hugs were given all around after Lisa Van Hefty, a special education teacher at Otto H. Schultz Elementary School, won the state's 2026 Teacher of the Year award for her dedication to making sure every student that comes into the school is taught and loved no matter their ability.
She's a champion for growth, both academic and personal.
Some of these little people come into our world and they're not always given the best shot, and it's our responsibility to make that happen for them.
Using this mentality to reach the hearts of students, parents, and faculty for nearly 3 decades. Katie Mangan has worked with Van Hefty for the majority of that time, sharing one of the many reasons why she nominated her.
When I started 25 years ago, as a struggling first-year teacher, she was the person that came alongside me and said, hey, we can do this. She's not just in the classroom working with the students that she's been assigned, she is there for everyone.
This attitude leading to State Superintendent Jill Underly to recognize her efforts, giving Van Hefty her flowers.
When she was speaking, I was tearing up because she nailed it. When it comes to working with kids in general, I mean, we all want the same things. For every kid, but especially for kids who are on the autism spectrum or kids with special learning needs, they don't want to be different. They just want to be included.
Van Hefty reiterating, it's our responsibility as a community to look after our kids.
They want to be seen, they want to be heard, they want to be treated like everyone else, and it's our responsibility as citizens, as community members, to do that for them.
Winning this award, Van Hefty will get a scholarship along with the elementary school, and the award will sit in the high school's trophy case along with their other accomplishments. Van Hefty will take a trip to Madison with the other 4 winners to decide who will represent the state for national events. Bill?